Hey guys, I want to talk about something. It's about a week old. But about a week ago, hey Fluffy Mama, quit. My cat's are trying to fight. Uh, about a week ago, Lauren Southern did a video about the removal of monuments in New Orleans. And I had read about this a month ago or so and actually had done a Facebook Live video about it and got pretty favorable responses. But I hadn't brought it up again, and I'd kind of forgot about it until she did this video bringing up the fact that in the middle of the night, the city tore down this monument, the Liberty Monument, and wore bulletproof vests and had snipers on the roofs and acted all scary like and undercover. And basically it was their conscience haunting them. They knew that someday their sins might come and visit them, and it would be more than they could bear, because they knew they were being traitors to our history. But that aside, there's a couple more monuments they're going to tear down. One is of General Lee, I believe, of Beauregard. And I want to talk about why I am so strongly against tearing down monuments of almost any sort. First off, I'm a huge Civil War buff. I love the Civil War. I have studied it for the past 6 years. I had no interest in it when I was younger, and I became interested in it by watching Ken Burns' documentary, the Civil War, 9 episodes. One Saturday morning I got up, turned on Netflix, saw it, started watching, and was hooked. And after that, for 4 years, I studied the Civil War almost every day. And the history of the Civil War is so rich and so American and so awesome that it's hard for me to understand how people can't be interested. But that aside, the history of the Civil War, the main reason that people are using, I had a long argument with a guy on Lauren Southern's video arguing about it. He was like, it was racist. It was a rebellion against America. How can you glorify a rebellion against America? First off, when the United States of America was founded in 1776, the states that joined did it on their own free will. No one held a gun to their head and forced them to join. They did it on their own free will, and they would have never done it if they didn't think they had the right to leave. That's like you joining a country club and then finding out there's no way you can leave. You can't cancel your membership. That's what it was like. So first and foremost, hey, quit fighting, you cats, you ignorant cats. Get away from here. My God, I should start the video over, edit this out, but I'm not going to, because this makes it interesting. Hey, get away from here. Get Edison. Edison, go away. Fluffy Mama, go away. Go. Quit fighting. My God. Cannot believe it. I used to never have cats because they fight all the time. But anyway, going back to that. They believed 100% that they had the right to leave the Union because they entered on their own free will. Second off, they left the Union. It was brewing for 50 years. The difference between the North and South was so monumental. The South was an agricultural, different society. The rich in the South, who always control everything, of course, the senators, their wealth was built on slavery. So it's like today, if you ask a manufacturing company, or let's just say we passed a law against diesel engines, which the left wants to do, can you imagine how bad that would hurt trucking companies? They would fight tooth and nail. It would ruin them. Just like getting rid of slaves would have ruined the South. Now that's not a reason. That's not moral. Diesel engines aren't moral. Slavery was. But it's very difficult for rich people to give up their wealth. And it wasn't just that. They had been taught for their entire life there was a difference between Africans and white people. Were they wrong? Of course they were wrong. But that's like me, and I've mentioned this to a few people. I don't know if I've ever said it on video, but I grew up Amish in a small community in southern Indiana. And that was that wrong? I mean, I believe that Amish are very cultish, and I believe it's a wrong way to raise people, but you're taught a certain way, and it's very difficult. It takes years to get that mentality out of your mind and quit fearing it. And that's exactly the way it was for them. It was just years of teaching, years of indoctrination, generations. Didn't make it right. It was just a fact. And I want to say this, that these liberals and these people that are anti-monument, anti-Confederacy, they would be the first people back then who would have been pro-slavery, because they are puppets and parrots who do as they're told and listen. They have no individual thought, or very limited individual thoughts. So that's why I don't hold it hard against the South. Now let's move forward and say, what is the difference? How was the South so immoral and the North so moral? What was the difference? The North didn't have mass agriculture, so they didn't need the slavery as much. And they had a lot more peoples, which gave them more diversity of opinion. And a movement got started, an abolition movement, which was great. But the average person in the North was no less racist than the person in the South. They didn't believe you should have slavery, but they didn't believe slaves were equal. And proof of that is that it took, after the Civil War, it took another 100 years for black people to have equal rights, another 100 years. And also, when Abraham Lincoln made it very clear during his entire presidential campaign that he had no intentions of removing slavery from the South, that it was all about keeping the Union together, and they didn't want slavery to grow into the western states. That's why we had Bleeding Kansas, we had the Kansas Redlegs, and the Missouri Bushwhackers, because it was all about people fearing for their future. These Missouri Bushwhackers, a lot of them didn't even own slaves. They were just afraid of losing their way of life. And it didn't even include slavery. They were just fighting for something, because that's what people do when they're taught a certain way. You know, it could be football. You fight for your team. I mean, it's just human instinct. Does that make it right? No, but don't forget, they didn't have the education we did. They didn't have the the access to knowledge like we do. They were much more encapsulated and protected in their own group of thinking. So you can't be too hard on them for that. You just can't. Doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. What matters is humans, human nature. So the North goes, and Lincoln was always afraid that either France or England would come in on the side of the South, because they needed cotton. The South really screwed up. They burned their cotton and quit sending cotton out, hoping to put pressure on France and England to join the war. Well, Lincoln knew that if that would happen, that would be very damaging to his effort of keeping the Union together. So he decided in 61 that as soon as they had a victory, or 62, as soon as they had a victory, no, it was 61, as soon as they had a victory, he was going to declare Emancipation Proclamation, and that would force France and England not to come in on the side of the South, because then it would become about slavery. So at Antietam, when they had a half-ass victory, not even a victory, but a draw, they stopped the Confederates. Lincoln declared, or brought out the Emancipation Proclamation and freed all the slaves in the states of the South, but he didn't free all the border states. And Anthony Bryan Logan talks about this, a black guy, conservative. I don't know if you guys know his channel, but he's good. He talks about this. They still had Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri. They still all had slaves. And not only that, the Union soldiers, the Union Army was allowed to conscript black slaves for their own benefit and have them build roads or whatever they needed them to do. So the slavery continued in the North. It wasn't like the North didn't have slavery. So the argument I'm making is, was the North so morally superior to the South that we should tear down the South's monuments but not the North's? The evidence isn't there. Whole regiments left the Union Army when the Emancipation Proclamation was read because they would not fight for a black man. And you know what? These weren't bad people. These were people who had been taught something from birth their entire life for generations, and they were misinformed, just like we often are today. I'm not advocating that it's right. I'm telling you the truth of what happened. So now, if it's an issue of morality, whether we need to tear these down, then we have to put blame where blame is due. And not only that, England had slaves. Almost every country was involved in slavery at one time or another. What does it matter who quit first or last? It was an issue. We weren't past it. We have to grow. Now let's go back and saying what I respect about the South. Only 6% of Americans own slaves, and I think that includes the North. So there's only like 4% of the South. Almost literally, probably 0.1% of Civil War soldiers owned slaves. They didn't even think about slavery when they were fighting. The reason they were fighting is because they wanted out of the Union. The issues, the reasons why they wanted out of the Union was largely based on slavery, but it wasn't the only reason. But it was based on slavery. So if you want to say slavery was the issue, yes, it was the majority of the issue that created the difference of opinion why they wanted, but that's not what happened. What happened is they wanted out because they believed they had the right to be out. Did the United States go after them because they had slaves? No, they went after them because they didn't want the Union disbanded. They wanted a strong federal government. So therefore, Lincoln used slavery in his favor as a tool to win the war. So there's the moral superiority. It was virtue signaling. The moral superiority isn't there. So if you want to, so you cannot condemn the South for their actions without condemning the North. It doesn't make either one right. It means that it's our history. We respect it for what it was and what it made America. Before the Civil War, people would say the United States are going to pass a law to raise taxes. After the Civil War, people would say the United States is. It became collective. That's what the Civil War did. And the Civil War made the country who it is today, how we are today. It was very essential. It was good that slavery was gotten rid of. Should it have took a war? No, of course it shouldn't have took a war. It was 650,000 lives? No. But once the war started, the North needed to win because it became a moral issue. So the South needed to lose, even though the South had many things that were, they were being screwed over. Congress, the majority of Congress and the Senate were Northerners. They had 5 times or 4 times the population or something like that. So they passed a lot of agricultural taxes that were heavy burdens on the South that didn't affect the North much. There was a lot of reasons for this hostility between the two. So I believe, and then the bravery and courage of the Southern farmer to fight for something that Americans today think didn't affect him. It was for his homeland. That's why black people fought. There were slaves that fought on the side of the South because it was their homeland and they were invaded by the North because they fired on Fort Sumter. They started it, the initial shot, but then when Lincoln invaded, that's when Tennessee and other states left because they were like, we're not going to tolerate that. They looked at it as aggression. They felt they had the full right to leave because it was a free will gathering of states. So I honor the Confederates' will to fight. They didn't lay down like conservatives do today and just die. We tend to just quit. And so the whole argument I'm making was the North morally better? No, they were equally to blame. There was many issues. So if we can't use that, then we'll honor both sides equally in their bravery and what they did to die and fight for their cause. And we're glad that the North won so that slavery ended quicker. And so that's where I am coming from. I'm a Civil War buff. I love the Civil War. I don't think anything should be desecrated when it comes to Civil War. We should openly talk about it, and we should openly have these conversations. And whitewashing history and getting rid of these things isn't going to change anything. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoy.